Hey, it's Ivan here, and it's time for a new installment of A New Leading Edge. So today we're going to talk about something that may sound a little pretentious. We're going to talk about the higher stages of human development. And in the past installments of A New Leading Edge, I outlined the 6 first stages of human development, also called the first tier stages, in the model I've chosen to use for this particular introduction, spiral dynamics. And now that we come to the next installment, the next few stages of development, we're moving towards what is described as the second tier. And what separates the first and the second tier is that in the second tier, we start to become able to see the path that we have been on in order to reach where we're at. So while each of the stages in the first tier is essentially fundamentalistic, and I'm completely trapped in my own mindset, like maybe I am a progressive liberal postmodernist, and I'm completely blinded to all of the other possible valid perspectives to being in the world, which could be a conservative mindset, for instance, which will lead to a person being equally blindsided to what is happening on the other side of the fence. So I went on a very personal journey with these stages, and I remember when my green started crumbling in my life. At the beginning of my 20s, I went through a severe life crisis, which threw me headfirst into, I stumbled into the world of spirituality because I was suffering in a big way, and I was fearing that I was losing my mind, because I hadn't really been introduced to a way of being in the world where these fiery energies of masculinity, of sexuality, of power, territorialism, how to be with that in a way that was in service to not only me but to the rest of the world. And so as a good little boy, a nice boy, I went into spirituality and I started meditating my fiery nature away. And so predictably I became incredibly arrogant. I thought that I was super enlightened, and I was going to get enlightened. That was the idea. And I would judge everyone who wasn't spiritual like I was as inferior human beings. I don't know if people found me as intolerable as I'm actually presenting myself as being in this moment, but I had pretty intolerable views on other people, because this is what happens when we get to this green stage of development. We tend to, after we have become sensitive and we have all of the right ideas about compassion and tolerance, but we don't have access to our power. And so then, because everyone else is a potential threat to our sense of well-being, I have to keep judging people. I have to make myself better than them, and so on and so forth. So I because I become a victim of them, I have to dominate them in my inner world, or potentially, eventually, the outer world, which is totally happening to the green meme in the world right now. If you just look at the social justice warrior movement, they are like one of the most tyrannical movements that exists in the world right now. It's awful, intolerable, pathetic human beings that can not do anything but blame everyone else for their so-called misery, but they're like the most fucking privileged people who have ever lived. It's ridiculous. And this is the insanity which starts developing as the green meme gets to the end of his life cycle. So what happened for me to start seeing the madness that I had been going through was I actually went on a pilgrimage to India And I realized in Bodh Gaya, no less, that all of my meditation had done fuck all for me in terms of accessing power, learning to be in intimacy with women, and all of the things that I actually wanted, I hadn't got at all. I had developed mastery over my mind, sure, but that mastery was only present as long as I was meditating. The minute I stopped meditating, I was a mess. So what happened when I returned from Bodh Gaya is that I realized that my spirituality was actually a bypass around very core questions of identity, masculine identity, who am I as a man, and so on and so forth. And so I started exploring that question, and I started seeing the journey that I had been on, all of the stages of my development, and I started seeing where I hadn't done so well. You know, on the red stage, for instance, I remember how I could be very reactive and flare up in anger as a young kid, but how I hadn't really integrated that in a strong way. And so that started becoming clear to me, and I started then seeing other people where they were limiting themselves, and I started being more of a challenging presence, and I started seeing, you know, maybe you need to work on that, you know, because what yellow, or Ken Wilber calls it teal, what yellow does so well is it sees these patterns and wants to bring mastery to them, and it also has a reappraisal, a reclaiming of hierarchy, but it's not a power hierarchy. So when I, as a yellow consciousness, point out things in people who are green, they will take it as an oppressive move a lot of the time, because the only hierarchy green can see is a power hierarchy. But in yellow, we reclaim hierarchy, but in the true sense of the word, which is the growth hierarchy. So as I start to embody yellow more in my life, I become able to work together with others in really effective, flowing ways. I start to be able to recognize the places where I'm my own worst enemy, and I start to bring growth transformation, transformational technologies. I start to have very strategic and, you know, empowered ways of mapping out my challenges, and I start moving towards sort of perfecting my human vessel. And this can lead to incredible systems of co-creation, and there's a beautiful book that's very popular in the world right now, especially in the integral world, called Reinventing Organizations, that portrays this process of yellow organizations in a very beautiful way. Highly recommended. And so this is really the gift of yellow. I see systems, I see, you know, where energy isn't flowing, I see where people are stuck, and so on and so forth. And that's a huge, you know, step in the right direction. But you might be able to see already where this is also actually a potential shadow, you know. When yellow comes to the place where it is starting to show flaws and weakness, there are certain things that start becoming very clear. One is, first of all, that there is an illusory attachment to perfecting my linear time-space self. So my name is Ivan, and if I'm a yellow thinker, all that I want to do is perfect the form of Ivan so I can show up in the world more powerfully. And then I will analyze everything inside of me, you know, and I see, okay, so maybe I need to work a little bit more on, you know, building my business, or maybe I need to go to a tantric sexuality training, or maybe I need to learn more martial arts, or whatever, you know. I can see the matrix of my life, and I can see where I need to have more empowerment. They were completely fictitious examples, by the way. Another thing that starts becoming apparent with time, with the flaws of yellow, the shadow of yellow, is that the way that I look at prior stages of development is I can see how they fit into the larger picture, but I can start developing a sense of impatience with them, and particularly with green, because green should really be developed enough to take the next step. And so I can look at green and I can look at their incessant complaining about their horrible lot in life, as if they're like the most miserable, struggling people in the history of the world, even though actually quite the opposite. They're the most privileged people a lot of the time who have ever lived. And then I look at them and I'm like, you guys, when are you going to grow up? You are babies. You're like pathetic, irresponsible little kids, and you're not doing anything to contribute value to this world. All you're doing is you're being a leech on society, sucking life force and money and not taking responsibility for anything. As you can see, it's not that hard for me to access this. But I think I do it with a little bit of love as well, because God knows I've been there. So we need to start getting to the place, and it tends to be that this happens because life humbles us, that our attachment to being the masterful savior of ignorance and the masterful self-realizer, the person who does all of the right practices in order to become the best version of himself, that structure needs to start crumbling, and it often does so through severe initiations. It can come through illness, as it did for me. It can come through humiliation, as it also did for me. I guess I needed a bit of a strong medicine. And so what starts happening is that all of the strategies that once worked, they start collapsing all over the place. And for me, for instance, I had chronic illness appear as I got mononucleosis in the summer of 2012. And energy and life force was starting to leave my body. And I was setting up my own private company at that point. And I needed to make money, but since working literally made me ill, I couldn't make money, and then I was running out of money, and that filled me with stress. But I couldn't work without becoming progressively ill, and it was a fierce time, and I don't even know how I got through it, but I did. And bit by bit, this new turquoise paradigm started manifesting in my life, where a way more mystical transmission from, source itself starts coming through. And whereas yellow is quite a masculine way, it's more bringing more of the conservative values again into the world as a compensatory move to all of the crazy feminine politics, the give me more politics, receive, being a victim, seeing people as oppressors. It's a bit of a dark feminine quality, the shadow of the feminine. Then we also see a bit of a shadow in the yellow, and then again we return to a higher stage of a more feminine, I would say, a more we space, a more communal way of being in the world, which is turquoise. But obviously it builds on all of these reclaiming of masculine agency, of mastery, of growth hierarchy, of seeing systems, and so on and so forth. So what collapses then is the idea that Ivan is such a strong entity in my life that I need to, in a way, defend and keep propagating and keep mastering, and so on and so forth. And so I become way more surrendered to the way that life wants to move through me. And I become way more attuned to nature itself. As I started accessing turquoise very stably, trees started speaking to me. Shamanistic qualities started waking up in me, and archetypal emergence in the world wasn't anymore a theory, it was an actual experience. I could feel archetypal emergence in people, I could see archetypes. Mythological themes, they stepped out of the storybooks and put on an Armani suit and started walking down Wall Street. Everything comes alive in a whole new way. And so I way more become a vessel for the mystery to manifest itself into the world. And paradox starts becoming something that I can hold, and my mind becomes ever more attuned to the emergence or the existence of paradox in the world. So one of the paradoxes of turquoise could be this spiritual truth that we're all perfect, but we could all use some work. But the truth is that, for me, paradox is inherently challenging to speak about, because it really isn't encapsulated very well by linguistic cues. And this is one of the things that is very, typical of the turquoise emergence in us, is that we are entering a more mystical field. And as we do so, we start realizing that reality is constructed, and that words can start seeming arbitrary, and we start seeing the symbolic nature of words, that they have no inherent meaning, no inherent value, and that can start making us observe language in whole new ways. We can start seeing, like literally our vision can start changing, and we don't take anything for granted anymore, just as we don't take our identity for granted, because the nature of our identity changes here on turquoise. It becomes more of a dynamic process that interacts with other identities. And so the nature of our identity becomes more of a natural process. Like now the wind is picking up, which impacts who I feel myself to be in this moment. Who I am changes because the wind changes. And there isn't a linear quality, a very constructed Ivan sense that needs to be defended in that way. Because by the time we reach turquoise, we have sufficiently processed our trauma and our contractions on previous stages of development that we don't feel so attached to defending ourselves in that way. And this is the reason why life itself can start flowing through us in a stronger way. We can also start becoming really almost paranoidly aware of how we keep constructing ourselves. Like we construct our ego from moment to moment, and so we see it happening in real time. That, okay, so this is where I'm propagating my sense of self, and this is where I'm propagating my sense of self. And it can be quite vulnerable. Turquoise can be incredibly vulnerable because the constructed nature of reality becomes so obvious to us. And then we notice that there is something in us that wants to, be Ivan still. But then we also notice the part where that is kind of bullshit, and we keep being torn back and forth in this field of contrast and polarity and paradox. And so this is really the place where Reclaim Your Inner Throne was made. And it's not the highest stage of human development, but it's the highest stage that I personally can reliably access. But I want to touch on the last stage that I find relevant in this inquiry, and it's called coral. And I don't have much to say about coral, but what I do know is that with turquoise, this mystical, amorphous way that reality keeps manifesting can become subtly apathetic with time, that we're sort of waiting to surrender to life all the time, or we're waiting for the transmission to come. But then what happens to will? What if I want to proactively create, but I don't want to do that from a sense of a contracted identity self, that, like how I did it on yellow. So then bit by bit this coral emergence starts coming. And the only person who has the balls in my life to claim that she's operating from coral stably is my friend Alanja, who is the founder of the Avalon training. And the way that she talks about it is that instead of being angry, I become anger. Being sad, I become sadness. So my being merges, becomes one with life itself. So it's not so much that there is a subtle self-contraction that surrenders to life, like on turquoise, because it's still not entirely oneness on turquoise, but it's that I become that natural impulse that flow through me. I don't surrender to it, I become it. And so then I become, my will becomes the divine will. And I become God in action. So in terms of these three higher stages of human development, we could see yellow as a way to pursue mastery from a self-contraction that is very advanced. It's a high-level self-contraction, but it's still a self-contraction which is based on a historical time-space reality. Then turquoise surrenders that pursuit to a more mystical way of being in the world, where I surrender and trust life itself, and I allow life to move me. But then, with time, as with every cycle of human development, it keeps shifting between agency and communion. And so there comes an agency again out of turquoise, which is a divine agency, where I become God moving in the world, which is obviously a very high-level spiritual realization. And so this is basically the three higher levels of human development. There will still be more. And there are plenty of other models of human development in the world. There's Robert Keegan's model, there's Susan Cook-Reuter's model, that are the two others that I mainly cross-reference biodynamics with, but there are other models as well. So I hope this has been of value to you, and yeah, who knows where we'll go from here. We'll definitely go somewhere, but I would love to hear what you'd like to know from this place forwards. Is there anything that you want me to talk about? Leave a comment under the video and we'll go there later. Okay. Thanks for being interested in this. I really appreciate that, and see you next time. Bye for now. If you liked this video and find the content to be important, I would love it if you clicked the like button and shared it with some friends. Really appreciate your help in getting this message and this information out there. Thank you very much.